Welcome along to Saturday Sport, halfway through the ANZ Championship, and as promised we're checking in with former international Natalie Avellino on her predictions at the start of the season, and she's done particularly well. Good evening, Natalie, welcome along. Congratulations on 3 out of 4 so far.
Yeah, I'm doing okay, Tom. I was quite excited when I checked out my tips before I came on, so not doing too badly.
They're saying, and I tend to agree, perhaps the most even competition since the inception.
Yeah, it is, and it is quite close, and we've got quite a few teams on 6 points in the middle of the pack there. So, but there are still some standout teams. But then they could be amazing one week, and then they just have a really close loss the following week. So unpredictable, which makes it really exciting. But I'm not sure how the New Zealand teams feel. They're a bit. 2 in the top 4 and 2 right down the bottom, so and 1 in the middle. So they're struggling a little bit, but very exciting in the next few weeks. All
right, let's run through the teams bottom to top and see your assessment of each. Tactics had that win over the Pulse and a couple of close losses, but then on the other side of the coin they have some droppings as well.
Yeah, they had a big loss to the Vixens, which they would have been really disappointed with at home, and then just only lost by a few goals just the other night to the Mystics. So they put out some amazing netball. I think it's been talked about they're missing a key defender. Now they've lost Jess Moulds with an Achilles injury, so that weakens them even more because she was quite a strong play for them. But I think Moa Kumwenda, the Malawi goal shooter, she has just been outstanding for them and fantastic for her, and and how she has developed over the season. So they've got the Steel next week, which will be an interesting game.
Unfortunately for Steel fans, it's the bottom of the table clash, dropping to 9th this week after losing to the Pulse, and you can get through with 5, but it's very mathematical, and motivation-wise it's not going to be easy for them.
No, it's not, and I think their semi-final chances have probably slipped away from them with that loss to the Pulse, and they really needed to win that one, and to lose by 8 they'd be really disappointed. So their season's been up and down, heavily penalised. They had 91 penalties against the Pulse.
Twice the number of the others.
Yeah, so heavily penalised, so that's something they need to look at, and I think Jodie Brown came in and out of the game and wasn't as dominant as we've seen her in previous weeks, which put a lot of pressure on Fowler Reid. So not a lot of options, same game plan, and the Pulse did quite well with counteracting their game plan.
Yes, I think they worked it out pretty quickly. All right, the Northern Mystics, the one team that's let you down. They were in your top 4, they still couldn't make it, but they've been slow starters.
They have been very slow. They are only 2 points out of being 3rd position, Tom. So.
Now you're being optimistic, very optimistic.
But their position is quite low, as in goal percentage for and against. So, yeah, they have been in and out. They did start slow, but now the connections are starting to come. I think Anna Harrison, when she came back into the team, made a huge difference. They had a big win against the Steel a few weeks ago, close win against the Tactics, but they're starting to find some form. Timmy Para-Bailey back into the mix. Not sure about that, but they've got some depth there, but obviously with a few injuries. So come on, Mystics, get up there for me in this top 4.
I see them as a dangerous floater, to be cliche. They could do some other teams some damage rather than perhaps proceed themselves. Yeah,
they could do, but I still think there's opportunities and a chance there for them to get into that top 4. You look at the type of players that they've got. Their mid-court's probably where they've been a little bit unsteady, but with Harrison back in that defensive end, Latu, I think she had 2 games in a row at 100% and only missed a goal in their Tactics game. So, and I think Marie Tutoye slowly coming back into form. So they've certainly got the capabilities. It's whether they can just put it together as a package and that they all turn up on the same day.
Well, the next is the last, or the bottom of the Australian teams, and often we're talking about the Fever, but we're not. We're talking about the Queensland Firebirds. But you had your doubts about them at the beginning of the season, all the same.
Yeah, I did, and Romelda Aiken hasn't been firing for them. She's shooting 60-70%, which is unlike her, and so if she's not firing, the goal attack needs to be. And Amarachel Wild's been doing okay, but just hasn't been stepping up. They've had a few changes around their defensive end and their mid-court. It's been reasonably steady, but I think Aiken's been the key for them in the past, and she hasn't fired, and that's why the team's sitting where they are.
All right, the Thunderbirds topped the table last year. They're now 6th, but you did say you thought there would be changes. They started well, they sneaked a couple of wins, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they weren't able to maintain that and have suffered since.
Yeah, they have, and defensively they're looking for that goalkeeper position that can really support Rebecca Bully. Their mid-court, they've had injuries with Lee Waddington at wing attack doing her knee and ACL. Emily Beaton has been injured and hasn't taken the quarters yet. She's had a stress fracture in the foot, so they've lost a bit of experience in that mid-court and trying to find what they can do, who they can bring in. Again, they've brought brought in a player, Wendy Jacobson, who retired 3 years ago, who played with the Melbourne Vixens. So, you know, they're trying to find that right combination. And, yeah, I think they've got a tough road ahead, and I just don't think the Thunderbirds will get there.
You haven't had a call from anyone, have you? Because we get all these players coming out of their woodwork.
No, obviously I'm a bit too past it, Tom. Maybe you have to be in your late 30s.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the season's far from over yet.
Correct.
West Coast Fever. Now, they always talk about rebuilding, and this year they're showing signs of it. A little inconsistent, but there or thereabouts.
Yeah, they would have been disappointed with their loss to the Steel and then going to the Magic and losing to the Magic. But they had a great win to the Firebirds on the weekend, and, you know, they'll be buoyed by that. And with Natalie Methurst getting a knock to the nose and coming off in that last quarter, you know, that was a good performance for them. So they'll be buzzing, and Norma will be pumped. You know, they'll be looking to build on that, and they're only 2 points out of that top four, and you know, with a lot of teams knocking each other out. And I think what's going to be tough for them, Australian teams having to play each other twice, and the Australian teams being so competitive and unpredictable at times. So they could sneak in, but when you rely on others to lose for you, it's going to be tricky for them.
All right, to the Pulse, one of the teams that you said be in the top four, they're there now, a little tenuously at the moment, but certainly showing signs that they're over that early hiccup, and Van Dijk and Wilkins working together now, and they're pushing forward, and Leota to come back. Yeah,
Leona Leota had a baby 4 weeks ago, so that's a bit keen, I think. But they're fortunate they've got the bye this weekend, so that gives her an extra week. And, you know, she could be coming back for their next game, so that'll be exciting for them. Donna and Irene, they're slowly getting their combinations. I think they're a bit, you know, static at times, and then running into each other against the Steel the other night. So they're getting there, and with them having the bye, it gives the teams below them an opportunity now to knock them out of the top four. But certainly, they're certainly showing that patience is the key. Certainly a Robin Broughton game, you know, being patient, resetting, going back to go forward. So, yeah, they're in that top four, and they'll be really wanting to consolidate that and possibly look at a top two finish.
All right, we move on to the Swifts. Now, they looked nigh unbeatable at some stage, and then they've had a few hiccups recently. They had control of the game the other day and let it slip completely. Yeah,
it doesn't matter how many goals you're up by. They're up by 8 to the Vixens.
You don't often lose from that far ahead.
No, you don't. So they'd be really disappointed. Again, they've suffered major injuries. Paige Hadley, a knee reconstruction. She injured herself at training. Then her replacement player did her knee when she played. So they again have had to bring in Sarah Wall, who played for the Melbourne Vixens a few years ago, has retired, come out of retirement 2 years ago.
Retirement means nothing, does it?
Well, it doesn't. But
used to mean stop playing.
Exactly. But and look, New South Wales have got a fair bit of depth, but they just needed somebody with experience after losing 2 players. So they're sitting quite nicely. They've shown some really good form. Caitlin Thwaites has been outstanding for them, and Shani Layton at goalkeeper. You know, those 2 key players that the Swifts picked up this year have really shown that you know, they're a strong team and could take this title out.
Yes, they got a game in hand, as have the Magic. Now, the Magic, you're not the only one here, Natalie, who didn't think in this year of new players, new coaching, etc., that they would be as competitive as they are. And it took a while before they got beaten, and that was only in extra time. Yeah,
it was. They lost to the Pulse in extra time, but they've had outstanding results. And, you know, we've seen a lot of media reports on how happy the team is and how close-knit. They're all staying in the one place, which in the past the Magic have been between Wellington, Hamilton, Tauranga. So they're all based in Hamilton, and, you know, they're training every day together. And I think that makes a bit of a difference. You know, something I think the Steel are lacking with those connections and that team cohesion. So, yeah, they're putting it out together. But when you've got Liana De Bruin and Casey Williams or Kopua in the defensive end, you know, it's pretty tough to get past those two. And Jo Harton has been outstanding. And Ellen Halpenny, I think, has really stepped up and could be knocking on the Silver Ferns door for a Commonwealth Games berth. I think she, as too, Grace Rasmussen, you know, those two have really stepped up. And that attack line with Courtney Tyree is really flowing nicely.
And finally, the Vixens, you'd have to say the form team at the moment, and they play the Thunderbirds next week, so they could do some damage to a fellow Australian side next week. Yeah,
they could, and I think the Vixens beat the Thunderbirds. That really puts the Thunderbirds out, I think, of their top 4 hopes. The Vixens, you know, one week they've played outstanding, then the next week they've had a bad loss, and so, yeah, they've been a little bit inconsistent, a bit like the Swifts, I think. So, as I said earlier, the Aussie teams are going to knock each other out, and, you know, round one they might beat them, but then when it comes back to the round two that they play them, that they could lose. So, the Aussie teams are really going to be putting themselves under a bit of pressure, I think, and not doing each other any favours, that's for sure.
All right, thank you very much again for the mid-season round. We'll talk to you just before the finals, but you can't change your predictions. You have to stick with those 4, but you're doing so well. Why would you want to change?
Exactly. Come on, Mystics, just help me out here.
All right, indeed. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tom.
That's the South Today tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.